Good afternoon. My name is Judith Diamond, and I have the privilege of being the Dean of the Rotary Representative Network to the UN and international agencies. Dr. Tedros, Rotary President Jennifer Jones, General Secretary John Hugo, distinguished guests, Rotarians, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to Rotary Day at WHO to celebrate World Polio Day. And also welcome to all those joining us online. Thank you to the WHO and Rotary team who have worked tirelessly to bring this important event together for us today. It's my great pleasure now to introduce Dr. Tedros, the Director General of the World Health Organization, a great friend of Rotary and the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, and he needs no introduction to Rotarians. Dr. Tedros, I invite you to address the audience.
Thank you. Thank you, moderator. Thank you so much. President Jennifer Jones, Olga Nag, Mark Maloney, Ian Risley, and other senior leaders joining us online. Rotarians, dear colleagues and friends, good afternoon, and it's a real pleasure to welcome our friends from Rotary to WHO. As honorary Rotarian myself, I know firsthand the enormous value of your work, especially as a partner in the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. Since the initiative was established in 1988, we have reduced cases by 99.9% from 350,000 a year to just 6 last year. And that's thanks to Rotary and Rotarians who played a pathfinding role in establishing the GPI and have shown unwavering commitment to polio eradication ever since. So thank you for your leadership and for being pathfinder. And thank you for everything you have done to bringing us this far. Of course, eradicating a disease is not simple or straightforward. Despite cases reaching a record low last year, we have seen an increase this year, with 20 cases in Pakistan, 2 in Afghanistan, and 6 in Mozambique. Meanwhile, a case of vaccine-derived polio in the United States and the discovery of polio virus in sewage in the United Kingdom show that polio will remain a global threat until it is eradicated everywhere. We still face many challenges, including misinformation, hard to access populations, and community fatigue. Historic backsliding of immunization programs, which deliver polio vaccine to most of the world's children, has added to the challenges. Without concerted action, we could lose the gains we have made. The Global Polio Eradication Initiative's 5-year strategy is designed to overcome these challenges with proven solutions, adaptation, and innovative tools. At the World Health Summit in Berlin this week, donors, including Rotary, committed $2.6 billion to fund the strategy to help get us to the finish line. A special thanks to our friends in the government of Germany for hosting us this week. These funds will support efforts to integrate polio activities in routine immunization and other essential health programs in affected countries. This will help us to roll out type 2 novel oral polio vaccine to help stop variant poliovirus outbreaks more sustainably. This effort is well on the way, with more than 500 million doses already administered. And they will support the GPI's commitment to empowering women at all levels of the program. Gender equality is critical to achieving eradication because in many of the most affected communities, only women are allowed access to homes and children other than their own. Polio eradication is and will remain a priority for WHO. But even as we continue to focus on eradicating polio, we must look, as the title of today's session says, beyond polio. The communities that are most affected by polio face many other threats to health and lack access to the services and tools to protect them. That's particularly the case for many of the most essential services for maternal and child care, including routine immunization against other vaccine-preventable diseases. We must make sure that the significant investments that Rotary and other donors have made in polio eradication do not die with polio, but are used to build the health systems to deliver the services that these communities so badly need. After all, we haven't truly helped a child if we protect her from polio, but she dies from measles. At the same time, we must work with countries to address the underlying drivers of disease, the conditions in which children are born and raised, their access to nutritious food, safe water and sanitation, and clean air. And I know Rotarians do many of those. Madam President, dear friends and colleagues, on your way into the building today, you passed a statue commemorating the only human disease in history to have been eradicated, smallpox. I like statues. I want to add to our collection. And with Rotary's support, I look forward to the day when we together unveil the statue commemorating the end of polio. But even more, I look forward to a future when the only thing children ever learn about polio is in history books. Thank you once again for your partnership and leadership in this historic endeavor. And before I close, I would like to congratulate Madam President for her election. I said earlier that you broke the glass ceiling, and you told me that the next one also is going to make this a norm than an exception. So thank you so much again. Glad to be with you, and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tedros, for those inspiring words. For more than 35 years, Rotary International has made eradicating polio its top priority. What our partners and we have achieved in that time is historic and remarkable. We have helped reduce polio cases by 99% worldwide, immunizing more than 3 billion children, as Dr. Tedros said, against polio in 122 countries. And last year alone, more than 370 million children were vaccinated in 30 countries using more than 1 billion doses of the oral polio vaccine. In addition, we've just reached the milestone of 500 million vaccine doses of the new novel OPV. But if polio exists anywhere in the world, it remains a threat to people everywhere, especially young children. Polio is back in the mainstream news due to the importation of the disease to Malawi and Mozambique, and surprising new cases in Israel, the United States, and the polio virus identified in the wastewater in London. Despite these recent events, polio cases are at historic lows, and we have an incredible opportunity to eradicate this terrible disease forever. During the recent Global Citizen Festival, Rotary President Jennifer Jones pledged our commitment of an additional $150 million to the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. By helping us meet that commitment and performing hands-on active service, each of Rotary's 1.4 million members is bringing us closer to achieving a polio-free world. I want to thank Rotary members for joining us today. And I now want to bring to the stage Aidan O'Leary, Director of Polio Eradication at WHO. Welcome, Aidan.
So many thanks to Judith, and hello, friends and colleagues. And what I would like to do maybe at the outset is to express a very, very real appreciation to all our Rotarian friends and partners for all and everything that you do for polio eradication. Judith has mentioned very briefly the extraordinarily financial commitment and support that's provided year in, year out, through good times and bad. I would also like to highlight the extraordinary work that Polio has done, or Rotary have done, to ensure that polio eradication remains at the top of every political agenda. So whether it's the G20, whether it's the G7, whether it's the Commonwealth, invariably you find there's a Rotarian working in the background, working through the various different channels to make sure that polio eradication is at the top of that political priority. And then I would also like to really appreciate the extraordinary work that is done by Rotarians inside countries. And if people will excuse me, I will take the example of my good friend, Aziz Memo, who is your representative in Pakistan, and to simply highlight what is the focus, what does Rotary bring? It brings an extraordinary approach to problem solving and solution finding. So solving problems, finding solutions, but also to find a way to communicate complex messages to the top political leadership. This time last year, we had a meeting of the National Task Force in Pakistan, where we met with the Prime Minister and all the Chief Ministers. The Prime Minister at that time was Imran Khan, a famous ex-cricketer. So how do we ensure that he remains fully involved in polio eradication? And he drew the reference to the last wicket, and you're in the last over. And what's the most important thing for the batter on the crease? You cannot afford to take your eye off the ball. And with that very simple message, Imran Khan was fully engaged. So again, a huge thanks to Rotary for finding a way to make all of this happen. What we're speaking about today during the course of our session is the next steps towards the implementation of polio eradication and bringing us to our collective goal of achieving and sustaining zero. We have a strategy, 22-2026, which was launched in the middle of 2021, and it's all about delivering on a promise. And that's a promise that was initially made by Rotary. It has a number of key goals. We intend to interrupt transmission of both wild polio virus and the circulating variant polio viruses by the end of 2023, with certification by no later than the end of 2026. In terms of the objectives that we've set for ourselves, it's not just the traditional approaches of good campaign operations and good surveillance. It talks to the critical importance of maintaining political will. How do we ensure that polio eradication remains at the top of the political agenda? but it also addresses key issues that have been raised by Rotary. How do we listen and how do we engage with communities? How do we listen to what the key concerns are? But then more importantly, how do we actually respond in a way that begins to address not just the polio concerns, but concerns beyond that? And again, Rotary have been critical through the format of Polio Plus in leading and showing the way. We are also, I think we've seen reference to the ongoing innovation and research by the program. So the novel OPV2 vaccine, we passed the 500 million dose milestone over the course of the past weekend. This vaccine, it's as safe and effective as its previous variants, but most importantly, it's much more genetically stable, which means that the path towards interruption and eradication is now much narrower and much clearer and much more feasible. So again, the importance of innovation and research continuing to improve is a critical point. Why is eradication so important to WHO? It's important that we're able to reach every child everywhere in the world. Polio eradication is the ultimate equity program. Children facing conflict, inaccessibility, insecurity, children who have been marginalized within their own countries, those that are persistently missed by the regular health systems. These are the top priority for the program. We need to demonstrate that we can reach them, we can protect them, we can vaccinate them. And this program is very, very much doing that. So maybe with those brief words, I'd now like to welcome our Rotarian International President, Jennifer Jones, and Jeffrey Kruger, who are basically going to speak around how we're progressing with the partnership at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. And let me take an opportunity to thank you, Dr. Tedros, and to the entire WHO assembly here for the incredibly warm welcome. And also, I know we have partners here from UNICEF wanting to say thank you for being here and support as well. And to our Rotary family who is sitting, many of you in front of us here, but I also know there are thousands of you watching our broadcast right now. I want to thank you for tuning in and for listening to the incredible dialogue that we're having over the course of the next several minutes. I am delighted to be here with Jeffrey Kruger, editor-at-large of Time magazine, a big champion for polio eradication. And he and I think we feel like we're on tour together. We just returned a couple of weeks ago from Baltimore, where we are doing, I guess, a routine together about the importance of polio. So I'll throw it over you, Jeffrey, to get us started.
Sure. And is this live? It's my I am pushing. I am technologically completely imbecile.
A quick mic change. There we go. Thank you very much.
And I write about science and technology, so Jennifer, one of the things I wanted to ask you.
Want to do?
Okay, much better. Some folks in our audience might not be aware of just how long Rotary has been in this fight against polio and all it has accomplished. I was surprised this morning when you and I were speaking about how long ago it was that Rotary took its first steps into the world of conquering polio. Can you please give us some of the highlights and let us know just how rich Rotary's legacy is in the polio eradication world?
Sure. Let me take you back to 1979, actually a big leap back, and the island nation of the Philippines. And it was the power of one person to say that let's try and eliminate it off of this island nation. And others gathered around and said that this was possible, and they did it. and then came forward to challenge the rest of us to say, well, if we can do it here, can't we do it elsewhere, replicate it, take it around the world? And I will say at that point in time, we didn't have a global polio eradication initiative partnership. And to be honest, I think when we brought this forward, we might have seemed a little scrappy, and it was an unrealistic goal in many people's eyes. But slowly but surely, we started to collect our partners, and certainly the WHO, UNICEF, the Centers for Disease Control, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, and UNICEF we've been in this together now, and we know that we've made huge strides. As you've heard already in some of the comments, we're down to 2 endemic countries of Pakistan and Afghanistan, and I know we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about what's going on in these 2 countries, but with enormous pride that our membership has been able to raise more than $2.6 billion to move this forward. And I think that one of the things that I like to think about in terms of our Rotary involvement is that because we're a non-political organization, non-governmental organization, we exist all over the world, more than 200, we like to say 200 countries and geographical areas. And so our membership has been in it to win it since the very beginning. And because we have this global footprint, as was mentioned, we're able to go to government because we're leaders. We are the influencers of our communities. And so we're able to reach out directly to those decision makers to say, this needs to be a priority. You need to make sure that it is put into your budget, that we're making sure that that pledge
challenges drive progress and get us closer.
That pledge moment at the World Health Summit that Dr. Tedros mentioned and Aidan O'Leary, we are halfway there in what it is that we require. That $2.6 billion that was raised, I'm really proud that we were able to, as an organization, commit to $150 million additional dollars over the next 3 years. But we need to get to $4.8 billion, and that's going to require all of us working with our governments, making sure it's on the front burner. And I think we need to take the lessons learned out of where we've been, and particularly over the past couple of years with the pandemic, and say, what can we do? How can we improve this public health infrastructure that we've created? And we can talk a little bit more about that. But I want to throw a question at you, Jeffrey. It was mentioned that obviously we know of the case in New York. This is where you live.
Right.
And a state of emergency declared in that area. Tell me a little bit about how people responded to that in an area of the world where most people maybe don't even know that polio exists, let alone that it could be a threat.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the fact that we have been essentially without polio since 1979 in the United States has caused a lot of people to come to the conclusion that the disease does not exist any longer. But as most folks here know, as all folks here know, there was a case reported in Rockland County, New York, one of the most cosmopolitan counties outside of one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the world. It was in a single case of vaccine-derived polio in an single unvaccinated young male. The problem with polio eradication, and to the extent that there is a downside, is that it has allowed there to be a certain growing complacency. It has allowed people to think polio is something of your grandparents' generation. Polio is something from black and white newsreels. Polio is something about mothers in the 30s and 40s taking their children away from swimming pools in the summer. The county in which the person who was struck by polio lives, Rockland County, in his particular zip code, the vaccine uptake rate is 37%, which is a third of what we need for herd immunity. So I think we are in many ways victims of our own success. As Rotary often says, as recently as 1988, the disease was endemic in 125 countries around the world, paralyzing or killing 1,000 children a day. Now we're down to 2 endemic countries, but that does not mean the fight is over, because if there is 1 case of polio, there may as well be 1 million cases of polio.
Well, and I think one of the things for all of us to be thinking about is that with these cases that we're seeing, and we all know that there's going to be road bumps along the way to achieving a polio-free world. And not that we want to fearmonger, but I think we need to harness and leverage these cases that you're talking about so that people understand that we can use that to make sure that awareness is raised and that people understand that this is something we really do need to put at the forefront of public health.
Yeah. I often think of a time when my younger daughter was 7 years old, and I was looking online. I was doing some reporting on polio for Time magazine, and she saw a picture of a child in leg braces, and she was 7, and she said, "What's wrong with that boy?" And I said, "Well, he has polio." And she said what any 7-year-old would say. 7-year-olds are very me-directed people. And she asked me the question, could that happen to me? And I was able to say 4 of the most powerful words I've ever been able to say to one of my children, which is, "No, honey, it can't." And the reason is she was vaccinated. And I think we have to remember that this is not something that is guaranteed around the world. This is something that has to be worked for so that all parents can say, "No, honey, it can't."
Very powerful. I know you talk about writing for Time about this, and you and I have spoken about this before, that in the early days when you were writing about polio, Rotary was not on your radar screen. And I know when we first came to you to be included in some of those writings, it was a bit of a wake-up call, perhaps. Tell us a little bit about that.
It was a bit of a head-snapping moment. I began writing my book on Jonas Salk and the polio vaccine in 2002, and the book came out in 2005, still available in all fine stores, by the way. And when I was first approached by Rotary, I was surprised, because when I thought of the key players in polio eradication, of course I thought of UNICEF, of course I thought of the WHO, of course I thought of the CDC, of course I thought of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but I had not thought of Rotarians, because I simply was unlettered in that role. I was unfamiliar with the significant, not just the enormity of Rotary's footprint, but the leadership role Rotary has taken. And now whenever, as I was saying to you before we spoke, whenever I'm writing a story about polio and I list the partners in the GPEI, I always list Rotary International first, simply because Rotary has the WHO, extraordinary organization, UNICEF, extraordinary, CDC, extraordinary. Rotary stepped forward and said, we were not founded to do this, but we have elected to make it our mission. We have chosen to eradicate polio.
Well, and I think that, go ahead and clap. I saw some hands that wanted to clap there. And I think, to be honest, I think that polio has taken us as an organization from our adolescence into our adulthood. And it really did galvanize us behind understanding that we had the power to do something so much larger than we ever dreamed we could have done. And that thinking remains with us as we move forward now, particularly as we look at the health infrastructure that we've been able to create along with our partners, that is not just about polio, it's about so much more than that. And the ability to tackle simultaneously diarrheal illness, other measles, tuberculosis, other things that are threatening to our world. It's also steering us in the kind of decisions we make as an organization. So it's quite
well. That's right.
Profound.
And we were talking about this a little bit beforehand. The idea that once polio is eradicated, and it will be eradicated, the infrastructure that has been built the roads, both literal and metaphorical, the cold chains, the delivery systems, the field workers, the ability to get polio vaccine out into the field, those systems don't go away, and they can be used, they can be repurposed for diarrheal illnesses, for tuberculosis, for malaria, for measles eradication, for all of the other diseases that are vaccine or cured, preventable or curable. Once the work is done with polio, the infrastructure can be redeployed for other diseases.
Well, look at what happened with the pandemic. I mean, certainly frontline health workers for polio were able to transit into being frontline workers for COVID because they understood surveillance, they understood contact tracing, the things that we already knew were important to move us forward. You've had a chance, I've had a chance to be in the field to provide those critically life-saving drops to a child. You were in Nigeria. Tell me a little bit about the life-changing experience you had.
I was in Nigeria. I had the privilege to travel to Nigeria with Rotary and with UNICEF in 2018. The plan had been for me to be there when there was a global rollout of a nationwide polio vaccination campaign. But just at the point before I got there, vaccine-derived circulating polio had been discovered in the wastewater in the northern city of Kano. And the vaccination campaign had to be halted in order to determine the extent of the wastewater spread of vaccine-derived polio, and also to ring vaccinate around the affected area. And I was struck more than anything by the nimbleness with which Rotary and its partners were able to pivot. They had planned to roll out, I forget the numbers, and I'm going to be misciting them now, but I think there were 50 million doses of polio vaccine that were supposed to be delivered that week. And instead, all of that energy within a 24-hour period was focused around that one region of Kano. I will say that one of the most moving experiences for me was being able to attend a naming ceremony of a 7-day-old baby named Ramlatu Masu. I will never forget her name. I've written about her. And I was able to administer her first polio vaccine. I didn't pretend that I was a hero that day. She would have gotten her vaccine anyway. And the other young children I vaccinated that day would have gotten their vaccine anyway. But to be able to have a hand in it, a literal hand, and play a role in preventing a child from ever coming down with this disease that has so terrorized humanity for so long was one of the most moving and gratifying experiences of my career and of my life.
Of those in the room, how many of you have participated in a National Immunization Day? Yeah, quite a few hands. It really is a moving and meaningful experience to be able to do that. We're down to 2 endemic countries, as we talked about. I know a similar experience that I've had in a few different areas, but I want to get, before we close out our section, to where we're still endemic, and that is in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I had a chance, as I've shared with you, to be in Pakistan in August of this year. And the primary reason that I wanted to go there was quite simple, yet I hope and think profound, to say thank you to frontline female health workers, woman to woman, to be able to sit down, to hear their narrative, their story, their journey. And it was profound to be able to walk with them, to walk side by side into homes, and to be able to see the work that they're doing, the doors that they're able to open, and the strategy, quite honestly, of mom to mom, building that confidence to be able to take immunizations. And that is a huge part of seeing us through the finish line. I want to also share that in being able to go to the National Emergency Operations Center, to be able to meet with our professional colleagues there, the amazing work that's happening to be able to make sure that you can identify not only from a community, but to a street, to a house, to an individual who needs to be vaccinated. And we really are closer than we ever have been. And even though we've seen these resurgence in different areas and different outliers, we're getting that close. And in these areas, the conversations with the health minister, with the army, they are so behind making sure that we're there. And even in Afghanistan, the work with the Taliban, we are making incredible progress. So we need to be positive about where we're at.
Yes, and I do think a special shout out is owed to the women and to the mothers. When I was in Nigeria, I attended a men's only meeting in a mosque, and it was very moving because a lot of the men stood and pledged that they would not let their children go unvaccinated. But it was really the women, the gatekeepers, the kin keepers, the caregivers who really seem to be the spearheads of polio eradication. And we have some video footage, don't we, of your recent visit to Pakistan and some of the conversations you had with female health workers in Pakistan. And
I think we're going to take a look.
Roll that now?
name is Dr. Sophia Yunus. My title is Director General for Federal Directorate of Immunization. And this is the lead of National Immunization Program.
Barrier has been removed, the gender barrier has been removed.
To be able to be here as a woman and to be able to meet with the frontline female health workers, to say two simple words to them, thank you.
Thank you on behalf of our PEI program, I thank you.
Frontline workers, amazing team.
My name is Zainul Abidin Khan. I'm here working as a national team leader for WHO Polio program.
Today we're going to talk about the gender strategy and the importance of this to the polio program. Dr. Sophia, let me start with you first. You've been in the immunization world for a number of years. Is this changing the way that we're able to approach polio?
We found that females were reluctant to be vaccinated by male vaccinators. In every strategy we make and in every activity that we conduct, we ensure that females are part of it. We are enlisting people for promotion, recruiting through headhunting. In immunization program, it started in 1974, and since then the national immunization head was never a female, but my presence speaks it all.
Dr. Zain, as one of our partners, what does it mean from WHO's perspective?
As we follow the GPI strategy and WHO policy to always empower the women leadership. So I have the opportunity as a team leader of WHO. I have a huge team here, and I have the opportunity to actually exercise this policy.
So you're showcasing leadership at the organizational level. We now see leadership coming up from the grassroots. And what do you think the role of female frontline health workers means to our eradication efforts?
As we are heading towards eradication, there are still communities that require female frontline workers. We are trying to get more of them because most of the female workers, when they are going into the community, they need to be secure. So recruiting couples so that the wife and husband or brother and sister, they go together. So for such conservative societies where we struggle, both in terms of female vaccinators or the social mobilizers.
Dr. Zain, this is about changing culture, isn't it? And certainly culture in this nation. It's not easy, but are we taking enough steps so far?
Yes, you rightly said it's not easy. And this culture of this country is not easy to change overnight. But this polio program gave us some opportunities. And in this culture, the men are not allowed to go inside houses. So this is giving us opportunity to introduce female more in the team.
The EPI, the expanded vaccination program, and a gender balance is going to benefit from this because there's so many other immunizations that we need to be able to reach. How do you see that affecting what your work is, what's happening in your work?
We recruited a number of vaccinators, and we have asked the province to please let us know if you need additional workforce. UNICEF provided us with an opportunity to recruit 250 vaccinators, and out of that, almost all were for female vaccination.
Last thing I want to focus on right now is certainly part of the partnership, but what role do you see Rotary playing in the eventual victory as we cross the finish line in eradicating this disease?
So first of all, Rotary is part of immunization technical advisory group, which is called an NICC. Dr. Aziz Memon is a part of that. The level of advocacy and the level of penetration into the top government leadership that Rotary brings in, every community level, and the positive energy they bring into international and polio. So, Dr. Zan.
I've been working for polio since year 2000, and I worked in several countries, including India, Nigeria. Personally, I believe that we are trying to fulfill the dream of Rotarians to see this world without polio. The support of Rotarians, not only here, everywhere I saw, is more than a partnership. It's generous, and they never say no.
Thank you both for your time, and thank you for your leadership and everything that you bring to this effort. It is immensely appreciated, and my sincere gratitude to you both.
Thank you, and thank you for your time, and we really appreciate Rotary International's contribution to polio eradication initiative in Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will see if the mic, I still am having microphone. Press the button. Press this one. A single button. It eludes me. I am a Luddite. Thank you very much for your attention. This will be our second round, our second panel. I have a number of questions for some of the folks here, and I'm going to direct my first question to Judith. You have the reputation of being one of the most passionate and effective advocates for global polio eradication activities. So much of the campaign to eradicate polio has been about earning and preserving trust. Can you tell us what kind of efforts have been necessary to build trust throughout this campaign and how they're being applied specifically in Pakistan today? And what kind of long-term impact does this trust building have on public health as a whole?
Thank you, Jeffrey. Yes, I am passionate about ending polio because I hate to think of any child anywhere contracting polio, being paralyzed, or even dying from polio when we have a vaccine that can stop that. So I am very passionate. I've had the privilege of visiting Pakistan and India. And in answer to your question, in Pakistan, we are adopting strategies that have been very effective in India and Nigeria and other African countries, including, for example, holding health camps to address the broader health needs of communities, as well as polio immunization. In Pakistan also, we're providing clean water in many villages and schools with the support of Coca-Cola. We've also established many vaccination booths on the borders of Afghanistan and Pakistan, where thousands of people cross every day. And as President Jennifer mentioned, we also have the emergency operation centers working very effectively in Pakistan. Another really important facet of the program there, as it was in Nigeria and India, is engaging with the local religious and community, the traditional community leaders, to communicate to their communities the benefits of immunization and encouraging them to get their children immunized. When I was in Pakistan, we had a meeting with about 40 Muslim leaders, and it was very impactful. They listened very intently, and I know they went back to their communities, stressing the importance of vaccinations. Also, in Pakistan, I was very privileged to visit the KP area, Nowshera, Abbottabad, that northern area, where we have very challenging conditions. And I was very proud to attend the opening of a new health clinic there, funded by Rotary. And that was administering measles vaccinations, as well as polio and other health interventions. And seeing Jennifer's video just now reminded me of that very special day and the joy of the local women health workers having this facility. It was really immense, and I've never forgotten the look on their faces. And as highlighted by President Jennifer in the video as well, we saw that the role of women health workers has been a key driver in the success of the polio program, as they are trusted by their communities, and of course they're allowed to go into the homes to vaccinate children. And the increase in vaccination rates is down to the women health workers. They are a total inspiration. They go out day in, day out, in all weathers, and often very difficult terrain for maybe 5 or 6 hours at a time. And of course, it isn't just them going out for the one day. There's a lot of preparation leading up to it. So the pre-campaign operation, they have to create awareness about routine immunization, the importance of vaccines. They go to the antenatal clinics so that the mothers, when they have their babies, they know where to go to get the polio vaccination. And then, of course, they go out, they give the vaccines. But it doesn't end there either. They go back to their centers, and they then feed back and input to future campaigns. So it's a three-pronged process. And I'm just in awe of the women health workers. And of course, they help influence the social norms about vaccination, which is so, so important. The polio program has helped build public health resources, ensuring a greater willingness to access these resources and improved public health outcomes. And for me, it really is the plus in Polio Plus. And I can just give you one example. You talked with Jennifer about the legacy of polio and how it's helping with routine immunization and other assets, and with measles and polio. And I think India is a very good example of how the polio program has transitioned into the public health program there. And in 2018, using the polio assets, measles was reduced by 43%, which is quite staggering and really important. And of course, as we all know, measles is on the increase in many parts of the world. And I've just been at the Berlin pledging moment, which we've heard a lot about. And I'd like to say 3 things about that, if I may.
Sure.
And one relates to women health workers. First of all, it's remarkable that we were able to raise $2.6 billion. In a climate where we have economic crisis around the world, we have a war in Europe and huge disruption. We've never seen the like of it, really, for maybe 50 years. And yet, the commitment from donor governments and private bodies was such that we managed to raise $2.6 billion, which coincidentally, as you might realize, is the same amount that Rotary has contributed to the program. And I think that was a remarkable achievement. But of course, it's not enough. As Jennifer said, we need 4.8 billion. So the job is not done. But it was a huge, huge achievement. And it was wonderful to see the German government hosting it and Chancellor Scholz mentioning the polio program as an important global health. And I just want to give you a quote from one of the health workers that was featured at the Berlin Health Summit. She says, "I am doing everything to eradicate polio, and I hope you will too."
That's a wonderful note to end on. I had a follow-up question for Aidan O'Leary, for Mr. O'Leary. We heard from Dr. Tedros earlier about the high priority that the WHO has placed on eradicating polio for many years. How close are we to reaching that goal?
So, thanks, Jeffrey, for the question. And I guess there's been a number of references from speakers about 1,000 cases a day in 125 countries in 1988 to where we are now. And I think in 2021, we had the lowest number of wild polio virus cases ever recorded at just 6 globally. And I think that was a huge achievement. There has been a little bit of doom and gloom, if we're very honest, when we've seen the cases that have been reported from Pakistan to date this year. And I think it's important that we really kind of put that in perspective in terms of what's happening. And what I would like to do is to maybe go through Afghanistan, Pakistan, and then briefly talk about the circulating variant vaccines. So firstly, in Afghanistan, this time last year, we were basically in the immediate aftermath of the transition to a Taliban administration in Afghanistan. We had more than 3.5 million children that had been inaccessible to the program. We had a really big issue in terms of where we're progressing. As we stand today, we have just 2 cases of wild polio virus recorded to date this year. One in January, and one most recently during the course of the summer. But most importantly, we used to speak of the southern region of Afghanistan as a core reservoir. We also used to speak of the eastern region as a core reservoir. That's no longer the case. We have just 2 provinces of Afghanistan's 34 provinces that are basically seeing endemic transmission. And the full focus of the program, I think we had one of the speakers talking about the huge pivot, Jeffrey, I think you mentioned, that was required in Nigeria. We're seeing a similar pivot in Afghanistan. Why? Because the epidemiology has changed. The work that has taken place over the last 12 months in particular, we have absolutely pulverized the virus. We've pulverized the virus. And what we're working on now is basically the adjustments and the refinements that are necessary to finish the job in Afghanistan. In 2020, we had 8 separate virus transmission chains circulating across Afghanistan. Today in 2022, we have a single one. Just one is left. Just one. And I say that for the very simple reason that when the Taliban took over, it was doom and gloom. We're not going to be able to do this. However, 12 months later, we're probably in the best position we've ever been. Dr. Tedros visited in September of last year. We have a very serious momentum, and that has been reaffirmed most recently with meetings we had with the full Afghanistan country team, including the Ministry of Health, in Muscat. So I think we are really well set. And that's against a backdrop where Afghanistan is probably the most acute humanitarian situation anywhere in the world today. So we continue to work to find a way to basically solve the problems that need to be solved. In neighboring Pakistan, again, I think it's important to note that we've had a period of 15 months without a case. And then we've had basically a succession of 20 cases that have been recorded in the space of 3 to 5 months. And there's a narrative out there that it's over. It just can't be done anymore. Those 20 cases are concentrated in just 3 districts of Pakistan. Does anybody know how many districts we have in Pakistan? There's 180. Cases are concentrated in just 3 districts. When we look at where endemic transmission is taking place, everybody knows of the megacity of Karachi. Everybody's heard of Peshawar and Khyber. Everybody's heard of the Quetta block. These core reservoirs are no longer zones of endemic transmission. the virus has been completely cleared out of these areas. We have just 6 districts where we have endemic transmission in Afghanistan or in Pakistan. And that really has to be our top priority in terms of doing the job. Similarly, when we talk about these chains of transmission, we had 11 chains of transmission circulating across Pakistan in 2020. That was reduced to 4 in 2021. Again, just a single chain has survived through into 2022. And every single detection we've had in Pakistan during the course of this year can be traced back to a single environmental positive sample we had in Banu in April of 2021. So the key focus for the program is that over the course of the upcoming low transmission season, running from basically next Monday to the end of March, we have to make sure that this endemic transmission is completely interrupted. A single chain. Have we seen some exportation outside the South KP bloc? The answer is yes. But they are isolates, and it's not been sustained. We have more than 100 environmental surveillance sites across Pakistan. We are conducting testing either twice or once a month. We've received a very, very small number of detections, which are the absolute focus for the program over the next 6 months. So not only is polio eradication feasible in the remaining 2 endemic countries, it's within grasp. And I say this notwithstanding the horrendous monsoon floods that have been recorded in Pakistan in August and September. With 1/3 of the country underwater, more than 33 million people impacted, and more than 6 million people internally displaced. Those waters have receded, and the campaign will be working to vaccinate upwards of 25 million children starting next Monday. So again, we are working to find a way to solve problems in the place that it counts the most. And we're not doing it in what I would call an idealistic way. There's a very, very clear eye focused on what needs to be achieved, what the risks that have to be navigated, but the path forward is absolutely clear. When we come to the circulating or variant polio viruses, as they're referred, 90% of media attention over the last 3 to 4 months have been on basically New York and London. However, 90% of the circulating cases have been concentrated in just 3 subnational geographies. In northern Yemen, where the Houthi authorities have not allowed a campaign to proceed for more than 12 months. We continue to work with neighboring countries and with influencers with a view to get those campaigns up and running. In southern Yemen, we have been able to start. Last November, December, we've had no detections since March of this year in those areas. The second major place is the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. And again, what we've seen is a significant ramping up of activity, essentially from May of this year. We will continue to intensify our efforts. In northern Nigeria, and Nigeria is a country that has seeded outbreaks in more than 19 countries. So in 2021, Nigeria accounted for 2/3 of all cases globally. We've had just 9 cases in Nigeria in the last 6 months. So what I'm basically asking and reinforcing the point is that polio eradication is most definitely feasible. We have the tools, we have the strategies, we have an absolutely ruthless focus, not just on dealing with the symptoms and the spillovers, but what we're working to do is to target those areas that are actually the source of the transmission in the first instance. That's where our efforts are. The key to this, so are we working inaccessibility and insecurity? Yes. Houthis, Al-Shabaab, M23, Boko Haram. That's part of what we do. We're looking at children where there is no functioning health systems. We're looking to bring immunization services to these communities. And we're also working to bring vaccination to those that are most marginalized. In every single location, with the exception of northern Yemen, we have made significant strides over the course of 2022. And we intend to further intensify that through the end of 2022, throughout 2023. So what we need to do is we need to stay the course. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that very thorough overview. And I had I promised I will take just one more minute of your time. One quick follow-up question. WHO is one of several core members of this very successful partnership. From your perspective, what are key ways other partners like Rotary can participate in the effort to ensure that we finish the job?
So thanks, Jeffrey. I guess the key point that I would make is, why do we have a partnership? Because none of the partners alone can finish the job. And the purpose of a partnership is to really accentuate and strengthen our strengths so that the collective sum of the parts is more than our sum of those individual contributions. What Rotary does, so please keep doing more of what you're doing on the resource mobilization front. Your work year in, year out, in terms of resource mobilization, where you have Rotarians at all levels do an extraordinary range of activities, please, we need to continue that. We need to continue to advocate. Why do advertising companies spend billions of dollars? Because we might forget. Polio eradication needs to be at the very top of every political priority in every country that counts. Rotary is absolutely critical. Your members, your Rolodexes are so impressive. I mentioned Aziz before. Any problem in any part of Pakistan, give me one moment and he will make the phone call. We need to keep doing this. We need to keep politicians at all levels fully engaged so that we give this the urgency and the priority that it absolutely requires. And again, as I've mentioned at the very outset, really to thank you very much for all that you do for polio eradication. It is indispensable. Nobody else can do what Rotarians are actually doing at all levels within the program. Thank you.
I would like to direct this next question to the Honorable Hans-Peter Jugel, Ambassador from the Federal Republic of Germany to the UN here in Geneva. As Aidan mentioned, Germany has long been a strong supporter of global polio eradication and pledged significant new resources toward that end just this week. Can you tell us about the pledging moment you recently hosted and expand on why polio eradication is such a high priority public health goal for Germany in particular?
Yeah, Jeffrey, thank you very much. And I have to tell you, I'm very honored to be here with you today. And I guess I'm in a very comfortable position, which is not always the case. But in this case, I think I just received many thanks for the event in Berlin we have hosted. The pledging event, I think there was an overwhelming participation. And when I entered this room and I talked with colleagues and everyone said, oh, I was just in Berlin and just came back from Berlin. It was great in Berlin. So I had the feeling I missed some things. I was stuck here in Geneva, but I'm very happy that this event, this pledging event also was successful. Yes, there's still a gap. We need more, but I mean, we think it's a hopeful sign with these 2.6 billion in these times. I mean, a pledging event with such an amount of money really tells us a story. It's a hopeful sign of global solidarity and an important milestone on our last stretch, we hope, to finally eradicate polio once and for all. And I especially want to thank the Rotary International for your continued and repeated efforts and the great contribution you were able to mobilize again. And as a representative of a government, of the German government, I would like to add that this proves that multilateralism works, that international cooperation is working, plus private engagement. And it's not only about financial commitment, it's also, and as Aidan put it before actually, because you care that polio is on top of the political agenda. And that's an important issue, because what we need is political engagement and engagement of so many people, plus the media. This also helps very much. So we can look back on a successful cooperation with GPEI for more than 30 years. So we jointly worked hard to eradicate polio. But again, the fight is not over. And nobody is safe until everybody is safe. And this is a motivation also for the German government, because you also asked me, what is the motivation of Germany to invest in global health and especially to eradicate polio? Well, we all know the only protection against polio is the vaccine. And while COVID-19 pandemic caused painful setbacks because some immunization campaigns could not be held as planned, we have still come closer than ever to our goal of eradicating polio worldwide. But it would be fatal to relent in our efforts now, because our achievements are fragile. A disease can spread very quickly again from one place to another in our interconnected world. And actually, we want to have that interconnected world, and we want to preserve it. So we support GPEI, which has adopted the ambitious goal of completely eradicating all forms of polio by 2026. And we love dates, because it shows, okay, we can maximize our efforts, and there's an aim we can a target we can aim at. So with the financial resources we have jointly committed this week, and we are able to immunize nearly 370 million children against polio. I mean, that's a number. And that's great that we can help the children, so many children, with this initiative. But we will also be able to fund laboratories and vital monitoring activities in order to be able to respond quickly to outbreaks of polio and other infectious diseases. And this is important to notice. This means by supporting the initiative, we are also strengthening national health systems far beyond polio. And the whole infrastructure, laboratories, I mentioned it, cold chain, health personnel, also facilities, health facilities. And this helps also to fight other diseases such as Ebola and measles. We cannot forget also these diseases. Therefore, we must also ensure that those assets of polio eradication also can be in a transition to the health systems, which is of utmost importance, because we all want to contribute to resilient health systems. And this is actually we want to achieve. I mean, taking into account all the crises we are facing, the conflicts in the world, and I also want to mention the climate crisis. What we need is actually resilience. We have to invest in resilience. And I would also like to emphasize what is important for the German government, and it's actually written here when I see mothers and children. We also have to empowering women and girls. We have in the framework of Germany is actually reinforcing this policy, the feminist foreign policy or feminist development cooperation, to empower women also to take part in our struggle against the diseases, but also be part of the solution and the solution finding. So this is of utmost importance. So to achieve our common goal, we must address gender-based barriers to health services. And it was mentioned also in the video we have seen before. Health, and let me, as a representative of the German government, we working on global health actually in many fora. So not only with TPEI, with WHO, with Rotary, but also with the G7, to give you examples. So we are at right now the presidency of the G7. And what we want to achieve and focus is to prepare and prevent future pandemics and other health crises. And we want to strengthen health systems, accelerating progress towards universal health coverage. And Germany proposed a pact for pandemic readiness. So we want that the G7 care and engage when it comes to pandemic readiness worldwide. We want to work on collaborative surveillance and health emergency workforce development, but we would also support building capacities for at least 100 lower and middle income countries until 2027. And this is also to be seen in the context that Germany favors a pandemic treaty. So this comes all together, this engagement, and this is the political engagement we are committed to. So with the German contribution of 75 million euros, I think we can contribute to your efforts, and I can tell you that Germany will remain a strong and committed partner in the global fight against polio. And again, let's fight together and let's have this as a shared priority. Thank you.
And I would like to direct this question to Stephen Laurier, and I fear I have mangled your name. You've taught me once how to say it, and I've forgotten, so I apologize. The director of UNICEF's polio eradication program. The endemic countries aren't the only places we continue to immunize children. Can you talk a little bit about recent outbreaks and how the global vaccination campaign is affecting them?
Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey. You pronounce it quite well, so you didn't mangle it at all.
Thank you. I got lucky.
Yeah, we actually vaccinate far more children than only in the endemics. And as Hans-Peter said, over 370 million a year. So that cannot only be in Afghanistan and Pakistan. We have been dealing with a number of outbreaks, and particularly at the beginning of last year, we were a bit shocked because suddenly we got an outbreak of wild polio virus in southeastern Africa, in Malawi and Mozambique, where we found in total 7 cases, and that shook the world a bit. How come that suddenly you have wild polio virus in those places? And this was an importation from Pakistan, and that shows us as long as we haven't eradicated polio somewhere, it will pop up somewhere else. The virus travels and finds children who are not vaccinated. And that's the key, children who are not vaccinated. What we have seen over the past years, and particularly after COVID, is that the vaccination coverage rates have declined significantly. This is the biggest sustained decline since 30 years. And that is a weakness to the program. Vaccination needs to be strengthened, because if we don't have routine immunization going on, then we have a weakness and the virus will find the cracks in there. We also have seen, and we talked about it before, you mentioned it in the US, where we had outbreaks of the non-wild variants. What we have seen there is that there is a lot of vaccine hesitancy that has popped up in the world. And with a 37% vaccination rate in that county, that is quite concerning. But we see that in different places in the world, in middle and high income countries. And then we really together have to do something that those children are also immunized. Because even in high and middle income countries, the virus will find its way. And the only way to stop it is immunization and routine immunization, and see that every child is immunized. This year alone, we have 18 million children around the world that have not been vaccinated for any vaccine. And that is worrisome because that number is increasing. And that's a main vulnerability. So we need to find ways to strengthen routine immunization. And the last thing I would say as well is in relation to the non-wild variants and in particular the outbreaks is of the 4 areas that Aidan mentioned that concentrate the non-wild variants is our conflict areas, our humanitarian areas. And conflict doesn't help us. Conflict, again, stops vaccination, stops routine immunization. Luckily, we have a fantastic tool at our position, this new vaccine, the novel oral polio vaccine, that helps us stopping these non-wild variants. And that has really contained some of these outbreaks and reduced the number of strains that Aidan was talking about. So we are in a good way, but we have not to let our caution down. And we will have to keep on investing, not only in polio, but also in routine immunization and in strengthening health systems so that we can sustain the eradication of polio. And I'm quite sure that when we will eradicate polio, this will be one of the greatest public health events that we will see in our lifetime. That if we want to sustain that moment, we will also have to continue with sustaining routine immunization, because the way to eradication, the pathway to eradication, goes to a strong immunization system. Thank you.
I just have a couple of more questions, and I'm going to presume on Aidan's goodwill and just throw you 2 very brief questions. Dr. Tedros spoke a bit about equity, and we've heard about falling levels of routine immunizations are a key reason for outbreaks. I understand that the GPEI has a specific strategy to address this. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Thanks, Jeffrey. And I think when we again speak about our kind of polio eradication, again, as the ultimate equity program, we put the hardest places first, not the quick wins. So we're really focusing on these places where it's most difficult to access children. When we had the pandemic, during the course of 2020, we stopped our postponed campaigns, more than 60 campaigns in more than 28 countries. And as a result of that break, viruses were allowed to circulate. We had 140 cases of wild polio virus in Afghanistan and Pakistan. We had more than 1,100 cases of circulating vaccine-derived polio viruses. So the message is, the moment you stop squeezing and pressing, the viruses run out of control and children pay the price. For the immunization system, we had 18 to 19 million children, 0 dose before the pandemic. That number is now 25 million. It's 25 million. And what we're basically seeking to do, not in the relatively easy places, but in the hardest places, what we're looking to do is to work with all of our partners, Rotary, US CDC, Gavi, our essential immunization systems, but how do we target our efforts over a sustained period of time to work to build immunity in these areas? We know that these communities, whether in conflict or otherwise, they don't just want polio drops. They want all the vaccines. They want nutrition for their children. They want broader healthcare. They want clean water for their children. And what we're looking to do is to try and build momentum in these critical areas where we actually work to bolster. The key for us is to make sure that every child is vaccinated, but I think, as Stephen has highlighted, we also want to bring the cavalry. We want to demonstrate that there is a path to reaching, vaccinating and protecting these children. And we would like to make sure that that opportunity doesn't just bring polio drops, it brings as much support as we possibly can. Which is why we are extremely focused and extremely targeted. So it may be just 3 to 4 provinces in eastern DRC. It's south central Somalia, purely the areas under the control of Al-Shabaab. It's northern Yemen. It's 7 to 8 states in northern Nigeria. Again, it's not everywhere. It's the really hard places that we're focusing on. And it's ultimately what we want to do, as I say, solve the immediate polio problem, but also make sure that those gains are sustainable and we have no further transmission coming into the future. Thank you.
And one other very quick one. One other very quick one, and I will also have a follow-up with Judith, and then we can bring this home. Many in our audience tonight come from countries long considered polio-free, and yet, as we've discussed, there have been surprising detections of poliovirus in the US and the UK and in Jerusalem as well. We talk about the numbers of doses in other countries and the numbers of children who are unvaccinated. And it does feel that in the highly developed world, we are a little bit spoiled. How concerned do we need to be about these recent, this recent appearance of polio?
So I think anytime we have a detection of polio, we have a reason to be concerned. But I do think it's important to recognize the differentials across the different places. The US, the UK, and Israel have are very strong sanitation systems, and so therefore are very low risk in terms of sanitation. They have very strong surveillance systems. They have very strong essential immunization systems. So with the right attention and focus, can they move very quickly to solve these problems? The answer is yes. But it's important that it happens. And you touched upon the issue of complacency. So my grandmother told me about polio. My parents understand polio. My generation, my kids, have no idea what I'm talking about. And if I wasn't working in the job that I do, they would have no idea. And I hope they don't have to find out. But what's going to be critical are 2 things. One, we have to have really robust surveillance systems, and particularly environmental surveillance. We do not want to discover we have polio when we have cases. It's too late. It's too late. Let's detect it in wastewater, let's detect it in sewage, and then move very, very quickly in the areas where we know we have problems. I think the second point is exactly the point that you highlighted. US, UK, Israel, essential immunization rates, late 80s, early mid-90s, high 90s. But in every single country, there are pockets of and under-immunized children. So what's not going to be the key to solving this problem is doing general booster campaigns. They'll help, and it's good to reinforce. What is critical is how do you actually close the immunity gap in those communities where you have the problems. So it's all around missed children, not covering and vaccinating the children that you've already reached. It's vaccinating and covering the children that you've never reached. And that requires a different approach. So I think Stephen touched upon issues of acceptance, confidence, and trust. We know that's a challenge. We're not looking for acceptance, confidence, and trust necessarily. We're looking for acquiescence to ensure that children are protected and vaccinated. We need to make sure that the vaccination happens. And that will determine how quickly the outbreaks are actually closed in the US, in the UK, and in Israel. And given that particularly the US and the UK have been massive investors in the polio eradication program, I very much hope that that happens sooner rather than later. Because for me, we are proceeding apace in many other countries. For me personally, I think it would be a disaster if the US and the UK were among the last countries with polio virus in the world. We need to move. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And Final question, I will return to Judith. As I mentioned earlier, you've been a major advocate for the polio effort for many years. What do we need to focus on to finish the job, and what resources are necessary to make that happen?
Well, the first thing that we need to do is to ensure that we continue to raise funds and awareness. And Aidan has highlighted the laser focus in the programme on eliminating the virus. And we also need a laser focus on fundraising and awareness. And we must keep polio eradication on the top of our agenda going forward. We've heard about the success of the pledging moment held earlier this week, and that really is a significant financial vote of confidence in the programme. And of course, there was also the announcement that Rotary and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation will continue to work in partnership to raise funds with the unique 2-to-1 matching arrangement. And that is key. And what this means is the Rotarians in clubs, we have to raise $50 million every year for the next 3 or 4 years. And we do have a new mechanism actually to help Rotarians do this. We have multifarious ways of raising money, and it's incredible the imagination and creativity of Rotarians. But we also have a new mechanism, which is the Polio Plus Society, where Rotarians can sign up $100 every year or more, and that goes to the polio program. So it makes it very easy. And of course, secondly, we also have to continue to work very closely to urge governments to invest in polio eradication. And we work as well, the ambassador mentioned the importance of global fora like the G7. Well, we also work to make sure that we get polio support for polio eradication in the communiques coming out of the G7, the G20, and the Commonwealth Heads of Government meetings. And that work remains critical because we didn't fully meet our fundraising goal of 4.8 billion. And we need to do that to ensure that we can carry out all the activities that we've heard so much about from Aidan and Stephen tonight. And we need the money to implement the 2022-2026 strategy. Ensuring the programme is fully funded will also help the GPEI continue to provide valuable support to countries in disease surveillance and to support countries to better prepare for and respond to pandemics. And at this point, I would really like to acknowledge the work. Rotary has a network of national advocacy advisors working in 20 plus countries, working continuously and tirelessly with government donors and keeping them on board. And I work in the UK with our government, and I can tell you it's an ever-changing scene. As you know, particularly in the UK at the moment, we seem to be changing prime ministers every other week. But that is typical of political advocacy. There's always changes going on. And so our national advocacy advisors, they're unrelenting. You know, you just build up a relationship and then they've moved on for one reason or another, but that's politics. But, you know, we're very steadfast. We just move on to the next person that comes in. And our national advocacy advisors do an amazing job. And they were definitely very instrumental in helping us achieve the 2.6 billion in Berlin last week. Thirdly, raising awareness of the importance of vaccinations. That is absolutely crucial. There's such a movement around the world now, and we've heard discussion on that already, of anti-vaccination. And of course, we're going to be discussing this in more detail tomorrow. We know that failure is not an option. If we stop polio, if we stop rather fundraising and we get tired and we move on to other things, polio will spread. And we're seeing that already in UK, US, Mozambique, Malawi. And we will return to a world where we could see as many as 200,000 cases annually within a decade. And that is totally unacceptable. In contrast, investing in polio eradication could save health budgets an estimated $33.1 billion this century, compared to the cost of controlling the virus and responding continuously to outbreaks. While those savings were calculated for this century, We know that the return on the investment in a polio-free world will continue in perpetuity. Ultimately, achieving this goal means that no child will ever suffer again. Because we have been so successful, many of us already take that for granted. And yet we've seen this year that we can't let our guard down, or polio will come back. When we achieve our goal, we will have a workforce and an infrastructure that is poised to continue to the many other global health priorities we face as a global community. Another plus in our Polio Plus efforts. So finally, I would urge all Rotarians and all Rotary clubs to pledge this year to raise funds for the polio eradication programme to ensure that we end polio and we keep our promise to the children of the world.
Thank you very much, Judith, and thank you to the entire panel for what has been a very rich discussion. As I often like to say in situations like this, when I have learned a lot, I'm smarter than I was an hour ago, and that's to the credit of everyone at this table. So thank you very much for your time and your effort.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for joining us here today at this meeting and your important contribution and support for the programme. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this evening. I hope that you found this World Polio Day session as informative, as inspiring as I have. Dr. Jonas Salk, the inventor of the inactivated polio vaccine, said, "Hope lies in dreams, in imagination, and in the courage of those who dare to make dreams into reality." We've heard a lot this evening about how close we are to achieving the reality of a polio-free world. We've heard about the courage of health workers, many of them women, who work tirelessly to build trust with families in their communities. They are justifiably proud of their role that they play in building a healthier society. We've also heard about resilience, about communities and countries that continue to make polio eradication a top priority, even while working to address other pressing priorities, including insecurity, natural disasters, lack of infrastructure, and often a combination of all of these factors. We've heard how the workforce and infrastructure that supports the GPEI often goes above and beyond, lending its experience and expertise to address these broader challenges, whether they are acute or chronic. This is another plus in Polio Plus. We've also heard how the Global Polio Eradication Initiative continues to identify new and different ways to reach the world's most vulnerable children who are living in these complex and challenging environments, including through increased integration of polio campaigns with other essential health interventions, and through the new zero-dose strategy. But perhaps most of all, we've heard about the power of collaboration and partnerships. The Global Polio Eradication Initiative is a rare example of an enduring and effective global public-private partnership. It is one that received a tremendous vote of confidence earlier this week as governments and private donors pledge new commitments to deliver on the promise of a polio-free world, as envisioned in the Global Polio Eradication Strategy. In this age of 24-hour news cycle, the world's long-standing commitment to global polio eradication demonstrates our capacity for sustained focus. We have faced numerous challenges, ranging from natural disasters and militant extremism to targeted attacks on polio vaccinators and rumours and misinformation about the polio vaccine. Each new challenge has forced us to adapt and innovate to meet the current challenges. Pakistan and Afghanistan are the only two countries that haven't stopped wild polio virus transmission, at least not yet, but we're very optimistic they will do it soon. And thanks to this remarkable global partnership, it is only a matter of time before they do. Our continued involvement matters because it demonstrates to the world that we should not give up on the most marginal and vulnerable amongst us. It matters because it shows that when we have the tools and capacity to do something that will benefit everyone, we can and should do it, even when it's difficult. And as we've been reminded again this year, if we relent in our efforts, the virus will exploit our complacency. Polio anywhere is a risk everywhere. Eradicating polio matters more than ever. And this World Polio Day, I encourage you to share Rotary's story. Tell everyone that we are still dedicated to a polio-free world and that they can help. We have the opportunity to end this disease, and when we do, it will be a rare global victory, made possible by our continued resolve and commitment to the cause. I would now like to invite Dr. Pierre Hofmeier and Dr. Anshu Banerjee to share information about our program tomorrow, where we'll continue to be inspired by collaboration and partnership on maternal and child health initiatives. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you, I thank you all for this wonderful afternoon. The speakers have been just outstanding and fantastic. And anybody who didn't know polio existed, I think now they're well aware. Tomorrow, we will go into more detail and we will look at things in a sharper manner. And we will also have presentations from all over the world. It'll go from Suriname to Bangalore, from the North Pole to the Australians. And we'll be able to see all these projects that are going all over the world for Rotary. And tomorrow afternoon and midday, we will concentrate more on a healthier future for our mothers and children. So in the morning, more polio, more vaccination strategies and techniques and technology. And tomorrow afternoon, mother and child health and all the projects that are going on all around the world. So I'd like to thank the teams. I'd like to thank the Evanston team for all they've done. And I'm looking straight at Jane. And I also like to thank the Geneva team, Rotary people who have done everything, the Zurich people who have been very supportive, and to make these days a success. So thank you very much all. And I cede the floor to Anshu.
Thank you very much, Pierre. And first of all, I just want to say how wonderful it is to actually have a face-to-face and in-person meeting. And I think we've been waiting for this moment. We were so concerned during the year when we were planning for this meeting, like when is the right moment, when is the right time, what will happen with COVID, will we be still in the pandemic, out of the pandemic, can we have an in-person meeting? And so from our side, for WHO, I also want to thank the people behind the scenes who have really made this possible. We always have an invisible team. And first of all, we have Reja Sarkis, who has been really helping us in getting all the logistics right. My own assistant, Katja Godin-Bilaus, who has been working non-stop as well. We have Olivier Ramonet, who has been helping us behind the scenes, Ivana Nemkova, as well as Jose Luis Perez Garcia. and of course the IT team as well. So I want to give them a big hand for making this possible. So as Pierre already highlighted, tomorrow morning we'll have a kind of transition model that we want to sort of look at on how all these investments that we have made in polio have also supported immunization, have supported introduction of new vaccines at country level, how this has supported polio plus immunization plus bringing in other interventions on top of immunization programs, and how all this prevention that we have looked at, how we can also build on that to look at maternal child health more broadly and build on all the investments that we have sort of, worked on over the last couple of years, the couple of decades actually, through the polio eradication program. And so we're going to look at the power of prevention as well. We're going to have a couple of speakers who are going to highlight exactly what do we need to do around maternal health? How do we get that back on track? We're off track to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We're going to look at how do you support early childhood development. We're going to look at how do you look at supporting midwives and what is the role of midwives in this, of delivery of primary health care, etc. And so we want to really look at broadening the agenda a little bit towards maternal child health. And as Pierre said, this will be really illustrated by examples of what Rotary clubs are already doing throughout the world, over the world. And we're going to have around 30 case studies, let's say, or projects that are going to be presented in the afternoon, and 2 that are going to be highlighted in the morning. So to illustrate sort of the discussion that we are having in the morning. So I hope to see you all again tomorrow morning, and enjoy the rest of the day, and see you tomorrow. Thank you.